Before we begin, have you ever met someone who told you a truth they've never told another soul? Tonight's story is exactly that, raw, hidden, dangerous, and unforgettable. If you love deep emotional stories, mature twists, and late-night confessions, hit subscribe, stay with me, and let's enter the world where secrets breathe. I've always believed that people only reveal the parts of themselves they're comfortable with. The rest, the messy parts, the hungry parts, the parts that scare even them, stay tucked beneath smiles, behind rings, inside quiet marriages held together by routine instead of passion. Maybe that's why I didn't recognize her at first. She sat at the far end of the lounge, legs crossed, fingers running along the rim of her glass as if it held answers to questions she wasn't ready to ask. I noticed her not because she was stunning, though she was, but because she looked tired. Tired in a way only people who've lived too carefully can look. She didn't belong there, and neither did I, but that didn't stop either of us. Our eyes met by accident. She smiled politely, the way married women smile when they want to acknowledge your existence but not your intentions. I returned the smile out of courtesy. That should have been the end of it. But fate doesn't care about what should happen. When I stepped outside to take a call, she was already there, leaning against the railing as the night breeze played with her hair. She gave me a small nod, the kind strangers exchange when they're uncomfortable but trying not to seem it. I didn't speak to her first. She did. Do you ever feel like you're living someone else's life? She asked softly, as though confessing a sin to the wind instead of a stranger. Her question caught me off guard. I hesitated, unsure whether she wanted an answer. But she looked at me expectantly, almost desperately. I think we all do, I finally replied. Some of us just hide it better than others. She bit her lip, nodded slowly, then laughed without humor. My husband thinks I'm at a friend's place tonight. There it was, the first crack in the facade. I didn't judge her. I could see she wasn't looking for validation or forgiveness. She was looking for escape. A place where the walls didn't whisper her responsibilities back at her. A moment where she could breathe without remembering who she was supposed to be. We talked. It started innocent enough, work, stress, cooking, hobbies she abandoned after marriage. But the way she spoke told me more than her words. She had lived a life of being needed, never wanted. A life of caring for others while no one cared to ask what she desired. I'm not doing anything wrong, she whispered, almost to herself. I just want to feel like me again. I understood that far more than I should have. The night deepened. The conversations grew softer, heavier, warmer. She touched my arm when she laughed, then apologized shyly, but didn't stop doing it. There was a moment, a shift. A line we both saw coming long before we crossed it. And yet, we crossed it anyway. But that part of the story, the part most people assume is the climax, isn't the beginning. The real beginning came later, when she told me the truth that stunned even me. A truth she had never said out loud. A truth she said she chose me, specifically me, to hear because I didn't know her husband, her friends, her life. She was anonymous. And so was I. A perfect audience for an imperfect confession. And I had no idea how deep her truth went. I didn't expect her to seek me out again, but 2 nights later, she did. Same place. Same corner. Same weary eyes hiding behind perfect makeup. I shouldn't be here, she whispered. But you are. She nodded. Because I need to tell someone the truth, someone who won't ruin my life with it. The way her eyes grew distant like she was suddenly remembering a version of herself she once loved but abandoned. I used to be spontaneous, she whispered. I used to be the girl who danced in the rain, who didn't care what people thought, who laughed loudly and meant it. Now? I'm the woman who measures her happiness in silence so her husband won't ask questions. She took a slow breath, as though steadying herself. Then she said the words that stayed with me long after. I didn't come here tonight to meet you. I came because I was afraid of myself, afraid of what I might do if I stayed home alone with my thoughts. What thoughts? I asked. She looked up at me, tears she refused to let fall clinging to her lashes. The thought that I might never be myself again. That scares me more than sinning. More than lying. More than being caught. She shook her head slowly, staring at her hands. I've done things my husband will never know. Things I never imagined I was capable of. I thought I'd be one of those women who stayed faithful no matter what, who carried her vows like a shield. But somewhere along the way, the shield became a cage. She gripped the edge of the table as though anchoring herself. I didn't cheat for passion the first time. I cheated because I felt invisible. I cheated because I needed proof that I was still alive inside. Not a mother. Not a wife. Just a woman. Her honesty didn't shock me. What shocked me was how calmly she said it. No guilt. No self-hatred. Just truth. What happened tonight? I asked. She smiled, a sad, fragile, heartbreaking smile. I almost told him. I almost told my husband everything. Not because I wanted to confess, but because I wanted to see if he'd even care. Then she leaned back, closed her eyes, and exhaled. I listened. She sat closer this time, her voice trembling, not with fear, but with release. I didn't marry the wrong man, she said. I just became the wrong woman trying to be his perfect wife. That was only the surface. The real truth, the one she never expected I would hear, came when she leaned in and admitted something that changed everything. I've done things, more than once. Things he will never know. Things I'm not proud of, but I don't regret either. She told me about the first time she crossed the line. Then the second. Then how it changed her. She wasn't addicted to chaos. She was addicted to feeling alive. I'm not a bad woman, she insisted. I'm just a woman who refused to die quietly inside her own marriage. And that was when I realized. What she was telling me wasn't a cry for help. It was a confession of liberation. She didn't want forgiveness. She wanted recognition. And she wanted her story told, by someone who would never reveal her name. I remember the night she lost control because it was the first time I saw the real her, the version she kept buried beneath years of politeness, routine, and quiet suffocation. It happened on a Friday, the kind of night where the city felt heavier, as though everyone was carrying something they couldn't name. She came into the lounge wearing a simple dress, nothing flashy, but the confidence in her walk was different, forced, almost trembling. She sat next to me without waiting to be invited. I shouldn't be spiraling, she said, breath shaky. I keep telling myself I'll stop. I'll slow down. I'll behave. She laughed at her own words. A sharp, dry laugh. Behave for who? I asked. That question broke something in her. I could see it, the way her shoulders softened. I realized something. He sees me, but he has no idea who I am. And I can't live like that anymore. She opened her eyes and looked directly at me. You're the only person I've been honest with. Isn't that strange? You know more about me than the man I share a house with. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. She wasn't talking to me, she was talking through me, releasing truths she'd swallowed for years. She slid her hand into mine, not out of desire, but desperation. I didn't lose control because I cheated, she whispered. I lost control because cheating made me feel human again. Her confession hung in the air between us, raw and unpolished. A truth too heavy to hold yet too dangerous to keep. That was the night I realized something. She wasn't telling me her stories for sympathy. She was telling me because once you start living honestly, even in secret, you can't go back. People assume the worst thing someone can hide from their spouse is infidelity, but they're wrong. Infidelity is only a symptom, never the disease. What she hid from her husband was far more intimate. She hid her real self. Her husband married a polished version of her, a version she built carefully over time, a soft-spoken, conservative, predictable wife who cooked dinner at the same hour, folded clothes the same way, smiled on cue at gatherings, and never, ever contradicted him in public. He doesn't know I hate avocado, she said once with a sigh. Why does that matter? I asked. Because I've eaten it for 8 years just to keep the peace. And that was the beginning of her small confessions. She hated sleeping on the right side of the bed but never switched. She hated the color gray but their entire house was decorated in it. She was a woman starving for life, trapped in a marriage built on routine. A woman who wanted to be seen as more than a role. More than a function. More than an accessory to someone else's comfort. And the irony? Her husband never suspected a thing. Because he never saw the real her long enough to notice she was missing. On the night everything finally made sense, she sat beside me on a park bench overlooking the quiet city lights. The air was cool, the world hushed, as though holding its breath for the truth she was about to release. She didn't speak for a while. I didn't push her. Finally, she asked, "Do you know why I chose you?" Truthfully, I didn't. I was just a man who happened to be at the right place, at the right time, with the right kind of silence. She continued. You're the only person in my life who wants nothing from me. It wasn't a compliment. It was a revelation. My husband wants stability, she said. My friends want the version of me they're used to. My family wants the daughter who never disappoints. Society wants the woman who obeys the script. She turned to me. But you? You don't want anything. You don't need anything. You don't expect anything. She said I was the only man who ever listened without trying to fix her. The only man who let her speak without steering the conversation. The only man who didn't judge, lecture, or moralize. You're safe because you're not in my life. Not really. You exist outside it. That's why I can tell you everything. She said I was the only man who ever listened without trying to fix her. The only man who let her speak without steering the conversation. The only man who didn't judge, lecture, or moralize. You're safe because you're not in my life. Not really. You exist outside it. That's why I can tell you everything. I understood. When someone has lived restrained for too long, their first taste of freedom comes in whispers, whispers they can't risk giving to anyone who holds power over their everyday world. Her confessions weren't sins. They were survival stories. She wasn't looking for forgiveness. She was looking for a witness. Promise me something, she said gently. Promise you'll remember me not as a woman who cheated, but as a woman who finally remembered herself. I nodded. She smiled the saddest, warmest smile I've ever seen. You're anonymous. I'm anonymous. Maybe that's why our truths feel safe here. She squeezed my hand lightly. I needed someone to know who I really am, even if just for a moment. And then, as if letting her soul exhale, she said. The truth I never expected wasn't that I did these things, it was that I liked the woman I became when I stopped pretending. We sat in silence after that, two strangers woven together by confessions, by pain, by the fragile beauty of being human. Before she left, she turned back and said, Tell my story someday. Not for sympathy. Not for judgment. Tell it so another woman who feels like she's disappearing knows she's not alone. And then she walked away. Head high. Step steady. Heart finally unburdened. I never saw her again. But I carry her truth with me. The truth she could never say to anyone else. The truth she hid behind smiles and routines. The truth she trusted me to hold without breaking her life apart. And that is why I share it now. Not to expose her. Not to condemn her. But to honor the anonymous woman who found herself in the shadows. And trusted an anonymous stranger to keep her truth alive. This is fiction, not confession. Names, events, and characters are imaginary. Any resemblance is accidental. The secrets in this story belong only to the story. If this story touched you, surprised you, or kept you thinking, don't leave without sharing your thoughts. More anonymous confessions. More untold truths. More stories that linger long after the last sentence. Subscribe for the next chapter of secrets.